This video is about upgrading the brake rotors on my Kona Big Hanzo trail bike. My goal is to get increased braking power as well as to deal with some brake fade that I've been experiencing on long steep descents. The color of the rotors after the ride would tend to indicate that they're overheating a bit, especially in the front. So my plan is to upgrade the 180mm front rotor to a 203mm rotor, then take that 180mm rotor, move it to the back, which currently is a 160mm, and then of course I've got appropriate adapters in order to make this fit properly. And so here we go. So here are the parts and the tools that I anticipate I'm going to need. Starting with the front 203mm brake rotor, Shimano RT MT800. This is the adapter, Shimano brake adapter, that I'm going to need in the front in order to accommodate that 203mm adapter. The way the brakes attach are center lock as opposed to 6-bolt, and so this center lock tool or similar is required in order to remove the retaining nut on the center lock and tighten it back up. This is the adapter for the rear rotor. Once we move the 180mm rotor from the front to the rear, this is supposed to accommodate a 203 on the front or 180 in the rear. May need some small brake rotor washers in order to get the proper alignment and spacing. That remains to be seen. And then just a standard set of hex keys or Allen keys. We'll only probably need the 5mm one, I think. This is a torque wrench for small amounts up to 9 Newton meters, and with a 5mm hex adapter on it. And for actually torquing the center nut properly, this is a large torque wrench that goes up to some large 200 Newton meters or something like that, and will allow me to get the proper torque there. Hopefully that's all I need, but we'll see as we go. So I've got the front wheel off the bike here. I've got my center lock tool, which you can see fits on there. So the first thing I need to do is remove the retaining nut for the center lock. Very easy to remove the center lock rotor. So let's check out this new rotor. As mentioned, this is the Shimano RT MT800, 203mm. Not a bad looking piece of kit, extremely light. I'd say it's noticeably lighter than the original. It looks like the center black portion is steel on the original, and this one appears to be all aluminum, I would say. So this should just fit right on very easily, and it does. Let's see what else this comes with. Little instruction manual. And it looks like it comes with a new center lock nut. In this case, I think I'll just reuse the existing. I'm not actually certain what best practice is, whether it's good to put a little grease on this or not when reapplying it. I think we'll just try it dry, see how it goes. Taking care, of course, not to cross thread anything. Now I've already got this set to 40 Newton meters on my torque wrench, so I'm going to just tighten it down to the proper amount. There we go. Guess I can remove this little warning sticker not to chop off my fingers. Now it's time to put the adapter on the front fork. So here we are at the front fork, and we should only need the 5mm hex key, I believe, to loosen this up. Okay, so there's the caliper off. There's little black rubber washers on here that help to retain these bolts, so if you ever have to work on this in the field, the whole thing won't fall apart and you've got to find parts in the dirt. So I'll be taking these off and reusing them. This adapter I'll no longer be able to use on this bike with these rotors. And there's what it looks like. And that should be roughly how it sits. Here's the bolts it came with, quite short with a little bit of blue Loctite on them. I'm not going to torque anything yet. This is just test fitting to make sure everything fits together. It looks as though the bolts I was using before for the front might be quite long now. I might want to consider getting shorter bolts, and I can see that these are only threaded starting here, so that might be a bit of an issue. And it is. That's bottomed out right now. Now, I guess the other way to look at this is I don't know how deep these holes go on the fork. I might be able to use these on the actual fork and then the short ones on the caliper to the adapter. Let's give that a shot. And same problem, that's bottomed out already. So these longer bolts, they possibly came with the previous adapter to be able to accommodate the other one that used the same hole for the caliper as well as the adapter. So I'm going to have to look through my old parts to see if I've got any shorter ones that will work in this case. Okay, I've located some shorter bolts that'll do the job. These are M6. I think the ones that came with the adapter are 15 millimeters long, and these are 18 to 20 millimeters long, ones I found, so these should work just great. Okay, so everything's on sort of finger tight. The caliper can still move. Let's try putting the wheel on and see how we're doing for alignment. The documentation that came with the Shimano adapter indicates right here, adapter fixing bolts and the caliper fixing bolts should be 6 to 8 Newton meters of torque. So let's do that. Okay, to align the caliper, I think I need to go as far outboard from the wheel as I can. My torque wrench actually won't quite fit on this bottom bolt just because of the shape of the code caliper. So I have to do it by hand, which is fine. I end up getting a feel for it, how hard I need to do it. This hex wrench is about half as long as the torque wrench, so I have to apply significantly more torque by feel to get it right. So let's see how much contact we're getting here. That's actually not bad. I imagine all the little cut sections of the rotor have burrs or ridges that need to wear off. So I think the normal bedding in process, bedding the pad into the rotor once I get it out on the road, will probably take care of most of that. I think we're looking good there. Okay, so onto the rear, where we'll swap out this 160 millimeter rotor for the 180 that was up front. The front has a post mount adapter system, and the rear is a bit different. It has IS mounts, and then the caliper itself are post mounts into the adapter. So I'm hoping I've got the right adapter that will allow me to do this for the larger rotor. Let's get this one off and we'll give it a shot. You can see that for this caliper, I did have to use little washers in order to get the proper spacing for this caliper rotor combo. One of the easy ways to tell whether you have IS mounts is that they're not threaded. As you can see, the bolt goes in perpendicular to the direction of travel of the bike, and they're not threaded. The actual adapter itself is threaded. So here is the new adapter. As mentioned, it did come with bolts, which I might not need because I think the other ones that came out are about the same size, but we will see. This is IS mount to the frame and then post mount to the caliper, and it's for 203 millimeter discs if it's used in the front, and for 180 in the rear. Just for comparison's sake, here's the old adapter, here's the new one, and you can see if I line up the holes, you can see the extra space there for the larger rotor. Kind of doing this backwards to how I did the front. I did the rotor on the wheel first, so once I get this mounted, we'll take the rear wheel off and get that done. Once again, get our specific socket and a long wrench for leverage, and for comparison, there's the 180. A little bit more leverage. You can see a tiny bit of the discoloration from heat that I was getting on that rear rotor. From what I've read, generally when you're getting that kind of color, I was getting that kind of color all the way across the surface, and I've since worn it off, but when I'd have a really steep, intense run, that whole surface would be discolored, that kind of bluish purple, and the brake would be fading, as I was saying. And I'm going to reuse this lock nut. Always taking care not to cross thread, or it creates a much bigger headache. Still have my torque wrench set to 40 Newton meters. There's little indents on the surface that make it, there we go. It locks on in little increments, and I guess that makes it so that it's harder for it to come loose on its own through all the vibration of riding. Okay, I think we're ready to put that one on now. Right,
Let's see how this fits on here. So first impression is it bottoms out on the rotor before it even touches the adapter surface. So I'm definitely going to need some kind of washer adapters here. Again, that's probably expected. I think it has something to do with these older Avid Code calipers and the way they were designed. I think they were intended to have washers in there. Okay. Okay. I've still got some rotor caliper contact here. So I'm just trying to eyeball it to see whether I'm going to need just standard washers to just take up a little bit of space, or whether I'm going to need these convex concave pairs, get some more thickness. I've never doubled these up before, used 2 pairs per side, so I don't know. I'm sure that's less than ideal. I think I'll try these washers first. So see, I'm starting to get concerned that these bolts are a little too short. There's only like 3 threads that are in there. Just going to try it out to see how it fits, and I may need to order some longer bolts. So the outer edge of the rotor is no longer rubbing on the caliper body, and it's pretty close. It looks like it could stand to be a tiny bit thicker washer there, but I think it's probably close enough. Okay, so I need to get some longer bolts that'll go deeper into the adapter. But aside from that, I think my spacing is good. Happy with that. So here we are a couple of days later. This package has arrived in the mail. M6 by 25 millimeter long bolts with a 1 millimeter thread pitch. Here they are. Looks like it will be not too long to bottom out in here, so I'll be able to tighten it all the way down on this side, and it will slightly go through this side of the adapter to allow for full thread coverage there. Should be much better than the short ones I have now. So let's put those in. Seems fairly well aligned. So let's tighten these up using the torque wrench. 8 Newton meters again. And that's good. That one torques all the way down. I was a little bit worried about this one because the previous bolt had only gone in a couple of threads. When I tried to tighten it down, which was not that smart, given that it only went in that little bit, I stripped out the top 2 threads just a little bit. So now you can see this bolt coming all the way through the adapter, so I'm getting all the threads in there, and torques down fine, so should work great. So there we have it. That's the conversion to these bigger rotors completed. On the front, 203 millimeters, used to be 180. And on the rear, used to be 160, and now the 180 from the front has been moved here. Nothing left to do but try it out, see how it performs. Well, I do need to bed in the pads to the rotors, and then test how it performs. So initial impressions from the rotor upgrade. Today's ride was trail, cross country, probably more cross country than trail, but there was some gravity trail riding. If I'm honest, I couldn't tell the difference. In this riding, I didn't feel like my other brakes were inadequate in the first place. So I guess it's fair to say that this isn't the reason I actually got the upgrade anyways. I think the true test will be when I try coming down Burnaby Mountain, which is when I take the non-technical option, just the wide, fast, steep trails down. My brakes were fading before. So I'm gonna have to try that out and see if it's an improvement or not. Having said that, there's no downside for trail riding to this upgrade. The brakes aren't any grabbier or too sensitive or anything like that. Feel is just fine. Feels exactly the same way it did before to me. I didn't really notice any additional power, but then again, I wasn't going on super steep trails where I may have really grabbed a full handful of front brake, especially. Yeah. Would I have done the upgrade just for this type of riding? No, I don't consider it worth it. My other brakes with the smaller rotors were just fine for this, at least at my skill level of riding. So after doing some extensive downhill riding on the new brake rotors, basically with continuous downhill, steep downhill that really taxes the brakes, and in past rides has overheated the brakes and made them fade on me, I'd say it's an improvement. I'm not like overly excited about it in the sense that it didn't magically make the brakes so good that I couldn't want for anything more. It's just an improvement. The power is still there. If I'm fair, there's no actual fade that I detected. I would say that the coloring of the front rotors tells me that they're still overheating. But again, I'm not an expert in how to read that. The rear rotor doesn't appear to be discoloring. This is, of course, the rear rotor is the one that used to be on the front, and it was discoloring under the stress of those downhills. And now it's the new, bigger front rotor that's discoloring. That might be just the way it is with, of course, the front brake. It takes the majority of the load under stopping on downhills especially, and so that might just be the nature of how it will be. But I guess key is that there was no actual fade, so I didn't feel unsafe. I didn't feel like I needed to slow down, or I wasn't going to have enough brake there. I'd have to keep pulling harder on the lever, and it would just keep going away. So yeah, it felt safe. It's definitely an improvement. Is it worth it? Yeah, I would say so. For the cost of just the front rotor and the adapters in order to make the calipers fit with the new size rotors, it's not that expensive an upgrade, relatively speaking, for mountain bike things. And so, yeah, worth it. Just not an amazing improvement like I had hoped it would be. So yeah, I hope that was useful to you. I thought it was a good exercise for me, at least, to get a sense of whether this is something that I'd want to do going forward on other bikes. And thanks for watching.